toward an understanding of technical and aesthetic worlds. Before technical and religious thought diverged into separate abstract modalities, Gilbert Simondon identifies a condition he calls primitive unity, a form of experience in which human beings, tools, gestures, and the world form a resonant whole. This unity is often misunderstood as a void, as if it were a lack or absence of structure. But Simondon argues otherwise. It is not nothingness, but a charged, affective field, a reticulation of key points, the direct mediation between man and the world. Simondon, on the mode of existence of technical objects, page 194. Rather than representing emptiness, primitive unity is a plenum of relations, a pre-objective mode of being where figure and ground are not yet separated, and reality is experienced as charged with symbolic and material significance. It is a condition prior not only to technics and religion, but even to metaphor and simile, because it precedes the very split that makes analogy necessary. In this state, gestures are not representations, but enactments of belonging. Objects are not detached tools, but condensations of relational force. What Simondon shows is not how thought emerges from a void, but how it breaks away from a densely woven ontological fabric. The goal of his philosophy, particularly through the aesthetic and philosophical modes of thought, is to recover the power of this unity, not to regress, but to reintegrate its logic through transduction, analogy, and individuation. In primitive unity, time is not yet abstracted into discrete segments, past, present, future, or measured by clocks or calendars. It is qualitative, affective, and immanent, woven into gesture, ritual, material transformation, and cosmic rhythm. In this sense, Bede's sparrow, passing briefly through the hall, a moment of light and warmth amidst surrounding darkness, echoes the lived temporality of pre-differentiated thought, but with a note of existential detachment. Such unity was not about finitude or despair, but about being with the world, a mode of duration in which time is participated in, not observed. The sparrow's flight expresses both the felt intensity of being in the world and the sense of mystery that surrounds birth and death, not as metaphysical puzzles, but as thresholds within a larger field of transductive becoming. The loss of primitive unity for Simondon is not a dramatic fall from grace, but a quiet divergence, a process of differentiation that unfolds as human experience becomes more complex and mediated. There is no single moment of rupture, no mythic expulsion or foundational error, but rather a transductive drift, where ways of knowing and acting gradually specialize and separate from the dense, relational fabric of magical thought, in which being and world are inseparable, emerge the distinct regimes of technical and religious thought. These are not opposites, but two poles of a shared origin, each abstracting a different aspect of the primal field, one operational, the other symbolic. As each develops its own internal coherence, they cease to speak to one another. What was once a unified field of gesture, force, and meaning becomes a landscape of isolated functions and disconnected values. What is lost, then, is not merely a symbolic unity, but a metaphysical intimacy with the world. The sense that objects, actions, and meanings are co-constituted in a shared rhythm of existence. Simondon's concept of the aesthetic object is best understood not as an artwork in the conventional sense, but as a material and symbolic crystallization of relation, a moment in which human gesture, technical form, and worldly force converge. One of his clearest examples is the sail tensed by the wind. The sail in itself is not beautiful as an isolated object. Its aesthetic quality arises only when it is in use, stretched and shaped by the invisible pressure of wind, calibrated by human hands, and directed through space and time. In this moment, the sail is not merely a tool, nor a symbol, nor a decoration. It becomes a point of participation, articulating the unity of function, intention, and environment. Its curvature is not composed to be looked at, but to work. And yet, through that very work, it becomes expressive of atmosphere, of navigation, of the world as a medium. The sail does not imitate the wind, it enacts it, giving form to force, and embedding the human within a larger rhythm. The beauty is not representational, it's ontological, a manifestation of unity and participation. This ontological beauty, emerging from participation and integration, stands in sharp contrast to the way objects are often isolated and alienated in modern contexts. Detached from their operative milieus, tools become mere relics, and forms lose their transductive charge. A sail displayed in a museum, removed from wind and sea, no longer expresses the dynamic relation it once embodied. It becomes an image of itself, a symbol without operation. Simondon makes this point again with the example of a statue situated in a landscape. The statue is not merely an object placed in space. It is shaped by and in response to the world around it. Its scale adjusts to the horizon. Its materials reflect the light of a particular climate. Its pose invites movement through space. Its beauty is not in representation, but in its relational coherence, its embeddedness. To be aesthetic, then, is not to be beautiful in a static, idealized way, but to participate in the world's rhythms and tensions, to resonate. In this sense, the aesthetic object is not a matter of taste, but of ontological attunement, a form of knowledge and being that joins the human to the more than human through form, gesture, and environment. Religious thought emerges as a modality that seeks to stabilize meaning, preserve values, and anchor human life within a framework of transcendence. It is characterized by its commitment to continuity, ritual, and symbolic mediation. Religious thought abstracts meaning from immediate material processes and codifies it into symbolic structures, rituals, narratives, ethical imperatives that are designed to endure across generations. Its ethical logic is categorical, grounded in universal imperatives that transcend situational variability. In doing so, religious thought secures a sense of permanence and orientation within the flux of existence. It provides humans with the means to navigate the uncertainties of life, not by adapting to change, but by reaffirming immutable values and stabilizing the meaning of human action within an overarching metaphysical order. In contrast, technical thought operates through operative engagement with the material world, driven by the demands of function, adaptation, and invention. Rather than seeking to stabilize meaning from without, technical thought arises from problem solving within dynamic systems. It proceeds transductively, evolving structures by propagating transformations across components and environments until functional coherence emerges. Technical thought is thus fundamentally pluralistic and inductive. It does not legislate universal laws, but responds to the shifting demands of materials, contexts, and forces. Its ethical logic is optative. Decisions are made not according to eternal rules, but according to situational possibilities. What can be done here, now, with the resources at hand? Technical thought embraces the modulation of being, crafting temporary stabilities that remain open to further transformation. The contrast between religious and technical thought thus reflects a profound divergence in their relationship to time and change. Religious thought treats time as something to be resisted or transcended. It aims to preserve a fixed axis of meaning across temporal flux, offering symbolic anchors against the instability of existence. Change, from this perspective, is often seen as a threat to the integrity of value. Technical thought, by contrast, is allied with becoming. It views change not as danger, but as opportunity for individuation and renewal. Time, for technical thought, is not the erosion of meaning, but the very medium through which new realities are constructed. In Simondon's view, the split between these two modes has led to cultural and existential alienation. Yet he also suggests that this divergence is not terminal. Through aesthetic and philosophical mediation, it is possible to relink the operational creativity of technical thought with the symbolic grounding of religious thought, forging a culture that embraces both stability and transformation as essential modalities of being. Religious thought, in its effort to stabilize meaning and maintain continuity, often relies on metaphor and simile to mediate the relationship between human beings and the world. In seeking to express the invisible through the visible, or the eternal through the temporal, religious thought deploys analogical structures that translate transcendence into accessible, material signs. Metaphor and simile allow religious systems to frame the world as symbolically charged, investing objects, gestures, and phenomena with layered meanings that point beyond themselves. However, this analogical strategy is intimately tied to a hylomorphic schema, the classical notion that beings are composed of form imposed upon matter. In religious thought, the world is often categorized according to a dual logic: sacred versus profane, pure versus impure, transcendent form versus inert substance. This reliance on fixed classifications seeks to preserve the integrity of symbolic orders, but at the cost of attenuating the dynamic processes of material individuation. Where technical thought sees matter as active and co-creative, religious thought tends to treat matter as that which must be shaped, purified, or transcended according to pre-established forms. Thus, while metaphor and hylomorphic classification enable religious thought to structure meaning and guide ethical life, they also reinforce a certain ontological rigidity that stands in tension with the open-ended dynamism of technical individuation. Technical activity does not treat matter as inert or secondary. Rather, it recognizes that matter possesses its own internal dynamic, its own potentialities and constraints that must be discovered, negotiated, and modulated through operation. Technical invention proceeds not by applying ideal forms, but by working within material fields of tension and becoming, allowing structures to emerge through transductive adaptation. A craftsman shaping metal, an engineer designing a turbine, or a builder adjusting stone to stress. In each case, the technical act is a dialogue with matter's tendencies, not a dictation of abstract form. Here, form and matter co-individuate, arising together through processes of interaction and transformation. Technical thought, in this sense, preserves a more originary relation to becoming than religious thought does. It acknowledges that the world is not something to be ordered from outside, but something with which humans must participate creatively and responsively. Through this operational engagement, technical thought reveals a vision of being not as a hierarchy of fixed forms, but as an open-ended field of modulation, invention, and individuation. Religious and technical thought emerge as divergent responses to the original unity of being, each carrying forward a partial inheritance of the world's primordial relationality. Religious thought seeks to stabilize and symbolize, fixing meaning through metaphor and hylomorphic classification, while technical thought strives to modulate and individuate, discovering new consistencies through material engagement and operational invention. Their divergence, however, is not a terminal opposition. Both modes retain echoes of the original unity they once embodied in undifferentiated experience. In aesthetic thought, Simondon locates the possibility of reticulation between these separated paths. Aesthetic activity does not seek to impose form from without or to preserve symbolic fixity. Rather, it weaves together figure and ground, operation and meaning, modulation and orientation. It creates a space where the technical and the symbolic can once again resonate within a unified field of becoming. Through the aesthetic, the human being is able to participate in a mode of existence that neither denies change nor clings to static forms, but instead reactivates the creative tension that underlies all individuation. In this way, aesthetic thought offers a pathway toward recovering the relational fullness lost through the historical divergence of technical and religious modes. For Simondon, magical thought represents the original mode of human experience prior to any differentiation among technical, religious, or aesthetic domains. In this primordial condition, There is no division between figure and ground, no separation between subject and object, action and meaning, tool and world. Gesture, material, and force are integrated into a single act of participation within a living milieu. Humans do not yet perceive themselves as distinct from the environment. Instead, action is immediate, symbolic, and affective all at once. A ritual gesture is simultaneously a technical operation, a religious invocation, and an aesthetic enactment. This undivided field of existence, what Simondon calls the primitive unity of magical thought, forms the foundation from which later modes of thinking emerge. Over time, however, the demands of life, survival, and complexity require this unified mode to differentiate into specialized operations. It is through this gradual process of differentiation that technical and religious thought arise as complementary derivations of the original magical field. Technical thought begins to isolate and develop the figure, the structured operational aspects of action. It becomes concerned with procedures, efficiencies, and transformations of material conditions. Religious thought, in turn, retains the ground, the affective, symbolic, and ethical dimensions of existence that link human life to forces beyond immediate manipulation. Where technical thought refines gestures into operations, religious thought elevates gestures into rituals, investing them with meaning and value beyond utility. They are therefore not fundamentally opposed, but rather divergent responses to a shared ontological origin, each carrying forward an essential aspect of the relational fullness once present in magical experience. Understanding this common origin is crucial for a broader project of cultural reintegration. The division between technical and religious thought is not a metaphysical opposition, but a historical drift, a bifurcation that, while necessary for the development of complex societies, has led to alienations that obscure their complementary nature. Technical thought, when severed from symbolic grounding, risks becoming purely instrumental, blind to the ethical and affective dimensions of existence. Religious thought, when isolated from operational engagement, risks becoming static, detached from the processes of real-world transformation. By recognizing that both modes stem from the same pre-individual unity, Simondon opens the possibility of a transductive reconciliation, a way of thinking and living that neither collapses one mode into the other nor maintains their separation, but instead weaves them into a dynamic, co-individuating network through aesthetic and philosophical mediation. Recognizing that technical and religious thought are complementary derivations of a common origin opens the possibility for reconnection and cultural reintegration. This path does not require a regression to undifferentiated magical thought, nor does it necessitate the erasure of the specialized advances each mode has achieved. Instead, it progresses through aesthetic and philosophical thought, which together preserve and reactivate the analogical unity once embodied in primitive experience. Aesthetic thought maintains the capacity to relate figure and ground, to link operation and meaning, gesture and world, without collapsing their differences. In aesthetic creation and perception, the human being re-experiences a mode of individuation that is transductive and relational, weaving disparate elements into new unities of sense and form. Philosophy, building on this aesthetic base, becomes the reflective activity that synthesizes these divergent paths, mediating between technical innovation and symbolic orientation, without subordinating one to the other. Without this mediation, Simondon suggests, cultural life fragments. Society becomes either a technocracy that idolizes progress but remains ethically disoriented, or a reactionary fundamentalism that clings to moral codes but rejects invention and transformation. Both outcomes reflect a failure to honor the true relational dynamism of being. Through aesthetic and philosophical mediation, culture can learn to think both modulation and value, both invention and cohesion, restoring the conditions for a dynamic, living unity of thought, action, and world. In this way, Simondon offers not merely a critique of alienation, but a positive project for reknitting the torn fabric of culture, one that honors the plural processes of individuation at every level of existence.